When I asked what time my son's funeral would be, my daughter-in-law replied, "He's long gone. We already buried him in a small ceremony for close friends only." A week later, she called me in a panic. "What are you doing to my life?" "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." I was arranging flowers in my kitchen when the phone rang. White lilies, Blaine's favorite since he was little. I'd bought them thinking maybe, just maybe, I could bring them to him at the hospital. The doctors had said he was stable, that there was time. "Hello?" I answered, still holding a lily stem. "Opal." Nola's voice was flat, emotionless, not the voice of a grieving wife. "I'm calling about the funeral arrangements." My heart stopped. The lily fell from my fingers onto the linoleum floor. "Funeral? What funeral?" The doctor said Blaine was... "When did you last speak to a doctor, Opal?" Her tone was sharp, impatient, like I was bothering her with stupid questions. I fumbled for words, my mind reeling. "Yesterday morning. Dr. Henderson said the surgery went well, that Blaine was resting." "That was 2 days ago," she cut me off. "Blaine died yesterday evening. Complications from the infection." The kitchen spun around me. I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles went white. "No, that's not. Why didn't you call me? Why didn't someone—" I tried calling. Her voice held no warmth, no comfort for a mother who'd just learned her son was dead. "You didn't answer." I grabbed my phone, scrolling frantically through missed calls. Nothing. No calls from Nola, no calls from the hospital. My phone had been with me constantly, waiting for news about my boy. "There are no missed calls from you," I whispered. "Well, maybe your phone was off. Doesn't matter now." I could hear her moving around, probably packing or organizing something, always organizing, always controlling. "The point is, I need to know what time works for you for the funeral. We're thinking Thursday at 2. Thursday. It was already Tuesday evening. That's very soon. Don't we need more time to plan? To notify people?" "It's planned already. Small ceremony, immediate family only. Pastor Williams from my church will officiate." My church. Not our church. Not the church where Blaine was baptized, where he sang in the children's choir every Sunday until he was 12. Her church, where I'd never been welcome. "Nola, please, can we talk about this? I know you're grieving too, but Blaine was my son. I need to be part of..." "About that." Her voice turned colder, if that was possible. "I've been thinking, and honestly, it might be better if you didn't come." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually stepped backward, my hip bumping against the kitchen table. "What did you just say?" "You heard me. It would be too emotional, too complicated. Blaine wouldn't have wanted a scene at his funeral. A scene. As if a mother grieving her only child was a scene. As if my presence at my own son's funeral would be inappropriate. Nola, you can't be serious. He's my son, my only child. He was my husband. And frankly, Opal, where have you been the last 5 years? You barely called, barely visited. Don't pretend you were close to him now." Each word was a knife, because there was just enough truth in them to hurt. I hadn't called as much as I should have. I hadn't visited as often as I wanted to, but every time I tried, there was always a reason I couldn't come, always some conflict or issue that Nola discovered. "I tried," I whispered. "Every time I planned to visit, something came up. You said he was too tired, or you had plans, or..." "Exactly. You tried. That's not the same as being there." I thought about all the birthdays where my calls went unanswered, the Christmas invitations that were withdrawn at the last minute, the grandchildren I'd never met because Nola said it would be too confusing for them to have multiple grandmother figures. "Wait, grandchildren? The kids," I said suddenly. "Blaine's children. I should at least..." "What children?" Nola's voice was genuinely confused now. "He told me. 2 years ago he said you were expecting. Then last year he mentioned the baby was walking and..." Nola laughed. Actually laughed. "Opal, we never had children. I don't know what Blaine told you, but we decided against kids years ago. My career, his health issues. We were happy, just the two of us. The lies. The elaborate stories Blaine had told me about his imaginary children. The photos he'd shown me that must have been of other people's kids. Why would he lie about something like that?" "I don't understand," I murmured. "Look, Opal, I don't have time for this right now. I have a funeral to finalize. The service is Thursday at 2 at Peterson's funeral home on Maple Street. If you really insist on coming, fine, but keep it together, okay? This isn't about you." She hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding the dead phone, staring at the lily on my kitchen floor. My son was dead, and I'd learned about it from his wife like it was an inconvenience she needed to manage. I called the hospital, my hands shaking as I dialed. "St. Mary's, how can I help you?" "I'm calling about my son, Blaine Morrison. He was a patient there, and I was told, 'Let me transfer you to patient information.'" The hold music was cheerful, upbeat, completely wrong for what I was feeling. Finally, someone came on the line. "Ma'am? I'm sorry, but we don't have any record of a Blaine Morrison being a patient here in the last 6 months." "That can't be right. He had surgery 2 days ago. Dr. Henderson was his surgeon." "We don't have a doctor." "Henderson on staff, ma'am. Are you sure you have the right hospital?" I hung up, my mind spinning. What hospital had Blaine been in? Why had I thought it was St. Mary's? The conversations with him over the past weeks blurred together in my memory. Had I assumed which hospital? Had he actually told me, or had I filled in the blanks myself? The funeral home. I could call Peterson's, at least confirm that much. "Peterson Funeral Home, this is Margaret speaking." "Hi, I'm calling about the service for Blaine Morrison on Thursday." "Oh yes, Mrs. Morrison. Everything is arranged just as you requested. Closed casket, small service, immediate family only. Will you be bringing the flowers, or should we handle the arrangements?" "I'm not Mrs. Morrison," I said slowly. "I'm Opal Morrison, Blaine's mother." Silence on the other end. Then, oh my, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Morrison. Your daughter-in-law specifically said that the guest list was finalized and that no additional family members would be attending. I assumed. She said I wasn't coming. She said it would be too difficult for you, that you preferred to grieve privately. I'm terribly sorry for the confusion. Too difficult for me. As if seeing my son laid to rest would be harder than not being there at all. "The service is definitely Thursday at 2? I asked. "Well, actually, there's been a change. Mrs. Morrison called an hour ago and moved it up to tomorrow at 10 in the morning. She said something about wanting to get it over with quickly, for everyone's sake. Tomorrow, Wednesday morning, less than 12 hours from now. She'd moved my son's funeral and hadn't even bothered to tell me." I hung up and sank into my kitchen chair, staring at the lily on the floor. In the morning, while I was probably having coffee and reading the newspaper, my only child would be buried. His wife, the woman who'd systematically excluded me from his life, would be the only one there to say goodbye. But maybe that's exactly what she wanted. Maybe that had always been the plan. The realization hit me like ice water. I might never even know where my son was buried. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in Blaine's old bedroom, surrounded by photos and memories, trying to piece together when everything went wrong. The room had been untouched since he moved out 12 years ago. His baseball trophies still lined the shelves. His college diploma hung crooked on the wall where he'd hastily placed it before graduation. When did I lose my son? It hadn't been sudden. It was more like watching someone disappear in slow motion, so gradual you don't notice until they're completely gone. I picked up a photo from his nightstand. Blaine at 26, grinning beside his new bride. Nola looked radiant in her wedding dress, her arm possessively wrapped around his waist. I remembered that day clearly because it was the first time I felt like an outsider in my own son's life. "Mom, I need to talk to you about the seating arrangements," Blaine had said 3 days before the wedding. His voice was apologetic, uncomfortable. "Nola thinks it might be better if you sat in the second row instead of the front." The second row? I'd tried to keep my voice light, understanding. "But honey, I'm the mother of the groom." I know. It's just, Nola's family is bigger, and they've been planning this for months. Her grandmother needs to sit up front because of her wheelchair and, of course," I'd interrupted. I didn't want to be the difficult mother-in-law before I'd even become one. Whatever makes Nola happy. But it stung. And looking back now, it was the first of many small concessions that added up to complete exclusion. I set the photo down and picked up another, Blaine's high school graduation. He was beaming, his cap askew, his arm around my shoulders. Back then, I was his whole world. His father had left when Blaine was 8, and it had been just the two of us for so many years. We were a team. "Mom, you're embarrassing me," he'd said that day, but he was laughing, happy, present. When had that changed? When had I become the embarrassment instead of the source of pride? I pulled out my old calendar from the year after his marriage, flipping through the pages. There it was, my handwriting marking every planned visit, every canceled dinner, every excuse. March 15th, visit Blaine, canceled, Nola has flu. April 22nd, Easter dinner, moved to Nola's parents instead. June 3rd, Blaine's birthday, we'll celebrate next week. We never did. August 17th, weekend visit, Nola's sister visiting, maybe next month. The pattern was so clear now. How had I not seen it then? Every time I tried to make plans with my son, Nola had a reason why it wouldn't work. Always polite, always apologetic, always with a reasonable explanation that I couldn't argue with. "I'm so sorry, Opal," she'd say on the phone, her voice sweet as honey. "Blaine is just exhausted from work. You know how hard he's been working for that promotion. Maybe when things calm down?" Or, "Oh, I wish you'd called yesterday. We just made plans with my college friends. Maybe next weekend?" And my favorite, "Blaine's been feeling a bit overwhelmed lately. The doctor said he needs to reduce stress. Family visits can be so draining, can't they? Family visits." As if seeing his own mother was a burden instead of a joy. I found my phone and scrolled back through years of text messages with Blaine. The change in tone was gradual but unmistakable. 3 years ago, "Love you, Mom. Can't wait to see you Sunday." 2 years ago, "Hey, Mom, something came up. Can we reschedule?" Last year, "I'll call you later this week." The messages got shorter, less frequent, more distant. But underneath the growing coldness, I occasionally caught glimpses of the son I used to know. 6 months ago, he'd called me out of the blue on a Tuesday afternoon. "Mom, are you busy?" "Never too busy for you, honey. What's wrong?" I could hear something in his voice. Strain, sadness, maybe. "Nothing's wrong. I was thinking about that time when I was 12 and got pneumonia. Remember? You slept in that uncomfortable chair next to my hospital bed for 3 nights straight." "Of course I remember. You were so sick, sweetheart. I wasn't leaving you alone. The nurses kept telling you to go home and get some real sleep. But you wouldn't leave." "Why are you thinking about that, Blaine?" There was a long pause. "No reason. I've been remembering things lately. Good things." He'd sounded like he wanted to say more, but then I heard Nola's voice in the background. "Who are you talking to? I thought we were going to start dinner." "I should go, Mom. Nola's making her famous lasagna tonight." "Okay, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too." It was the last time he'd said that to me. The last time he'd called just to talk, just to remember. What had he wanted to tell me that day? What had he been remembering? I walked to my kitchen and made coffee, even though it was 3 in the morning. As I waited for it to brew, I thought about all the warning signs I'd missed or chosen to ignore, like the time I'd shown up unannounced for Blaine's birthday 2 years ago. I'd driven 3 hours with his favorite chocolate cake, the one I'd made for every birthday since he was 4. When Nola answered the door, her face went through a series of emotions. Surprise, annoyance, then that practiced smile. "Opal! What a surprise. We weren't expecting you." "I know, I should have called. But it's Blaine's birthday, and I wanted to bring his cake." "Oh, how thoughtful. But actually, we're just leaving for dinner with my family. My mother made reservations at that new steakhouse downtown. I could come with you," I'd offered hopefully. "I'd love to meet your parents properly." "Oh, I don't think there's room. It's a small table. You know how restaurants are." She took the cake from my hands. "But this looks delicious. I'm sure Blaine will love it." Through the doorway, I could see Blaine putting on his jacket. He looked up and saw me. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "Not Mom, I'm so glad you're here." "Not Mom, what a wonderful surprise." Just confusion, maybe even irritation. "I brought your birthday cake," I said weakly. He walked over and gave me a quick, uncomfortable hug. "You didn't need to drive all this way. We could have celebrated this weekend." But we hadn't celebrated that weekend. Or the next one. The cake sat in their refrigerator until it went stale, and I never found out if Blaine even had a slice. Now, sitting in my kitchen at 3 a.m., I realized that Nola hadn't just been making excuses. She'd been training my son to see me as an inconvenience. Every canceled visit, every modified plan, every maybe next time had slowly taught Blaine that his mother was someone to be managed, not cherished. And I'd let it happen. I'd been so afraid of being the overbearing mother-in-law that I'd accepted every boundary, every limitation, every excuse. I'd tried so hard to give them space that I'd given up my place in my son's life entirely. The coffee finished brewing, and I poured myself a cup with hands that still trembled slightly. In a few hours, my son would be buried, and I wouldn't be there to say goodbye. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to understand what had really happened to us. I had a feeling Nola's panicked phone call was coming sooner than I thought. And when it did, I would be ready with questions of my own. 7 days. That's how long I'd been living with the knowledge that my son was buried somewhere, and I didn't even know where. 7 days of calling funeral homes, cemeteries, anyone who might have information. 7 days of sleepless nights and untouched meals. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a list of cemeteries I'd already called twice, when my phone rang. The sound made me jump. I'd been expecting silence forever, it seemed. Hello? What the hell are you doing to my life? Nola's voice exploded through the phone, so loud I had to hold it away from my ear. For a moment, I was too shocked to respond. This wasn't the composed, cold woman who'd informed me of my son's death. This was someone panicked, desperate, unraveling. Nola, what are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me, Opal. I know what you're doing. The lawyers, the questions, the investigation. Just stop. I sat up straighter. What lawyers? What investigation? I don't know what you mean. The probate lawyer called me this morning. Apparently there's some issue with Blaine's will. Some complication they need to discuss with me. They want me to come in tomorrow with documentation about our marriage, our finances, everything. A will. Blaine had a will, and somehow I was involved. The thought hadn't even occurred to me. I'd been so focused on just finding out where he was buried that I hadn't considered practical matters like estates and inheritances. I still don't understand what this has to do with me, I said carefully. Stop lying. Her voice cracked, and for the first time since I'd known her, Nola sounded genuinely afraid. You must have contacted them. You must have. I don't know. Contested something or claimed something or… Nola, I haven't contacted any lawyers. I don't even know who Blaine's lawyer was. I've been trying to find out where you buried my son, and you won't even tell me that much. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, Riverside Cemetery, Section C, Plot 247. The information I'd been desperate for, given to me like an afterthought. I wrote it down with shaking hands. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet. Her voice was getting that hard edge back. Look, Opal, I think we need to talk. In person. There are things about Blaine. Things you don't understand. What things? Not over the phone. Can you come over? Today? I looked at the address I'd written down. Riverside Cemetery. After 7 days of not knowing, I could finally go to my son. But Nola's panic was intriguing. What had spooked her so badly? I'll come over after I visit the cemetery. No! The word came out sharp, desperate. Before. Come here first. Please, Opal. It's important. There was something in her voice I'd never heard before. Vulnerability. Maybe even fear. After all these years of being shut out, now she needed me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'll be there in an hour. The house looked the same from the outside. The neat suburban home where my son had lived and died without me knowing. But when Nola opened the door, she looked like a different person. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her face was pale and drawn, and she was wearing wrinkled clothes that looked like she'd slept in them. Come in, she said, stepping aside. Do you want coffee? I just made some. The politeness felt forced, desperate. I followed her into the kitchen where I'd never been welcome before. The counters were cluttered with papers, legal documents scattered everywhere. Nola, what's going on? She poured coffee with hands that trembled slightly. The lawyer said Blaine changed his will 3 months ago. 3 months, Opal. Right around the time She trailed off, staring into her coffee cup. Around the time he what? Around the time he started asking questions about you. About why you never visited, why you never called anymore. She looked up at me, and her eyes were red-rimmed. I told him you'd gotten busy with your own life, that you didn't really want to be bothered with us anymore. The lie sat between us like a physical thing. I felt anger rising in my chest, but something in her expression made me hold back. But apparently, she continued, he didn't believe me. The lawyer said Blaine hired a private investigator. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. A what? A private investigator. To look into what happened between you two. To find out why you'd suddenly stopped trying to have a relationship with him. I set my cup down carefully. And what did this investigator find? Nola's face crumpled. Phone records. Documentation of every canceled plan. Every changed invitation. Every excuse I made to keep you away. Text messages I sent from Blaine's phone when he was at work, telling you he was too busy to see you. Emails I intercepted and deleted before he could see them. The room seemed to tilt around me. You sent messages pretending to be Blaine? Only a few times, she said quickly as if that made it better. And only when I knew he was overwhelmed with work, when seeing you would have been stressful for him. I was protecting him from his own mother? You don't understand, she said, her voice rising. When we first got married, you were all he talked about. Mom this, mom that. Every decision had to be run past you. Every plan had to include you. I felt like I was married to both of you. I stared at her, this woman who'd systematically stolen my son from me and tried to find words for the rage building inside me. So you decided to fix that by lying to both of us. I thought if you had some distance, you'd both be happier. I thought Blaine would focus more on our marriage, on building a life with me, and I thought you'd find your own life, your own interests. Did it work? I asked quietly. She looked down at her hands. For a while, Blaine stopped mentioning you so much. We had a good marriage, Opal. We were happy. Until 3 months ago. Until 3 months ago, she agreed. Something changed. He started bringing you up again, asking why you never called anymore, why you seemed so distant. I kept telling him you were fine, that you'd told me you were happy we were giving you space. But he didn't believe you. He said you used to call him every week. He said you used to remember every birthday, every anniversary, every small thing that mattered to him. And then suddenly, nothing. He said that wasn't like you. I felt tears starting to form. My son had known. Somehow he'd known that something was wrong. So he hired an investigator. Yes. And apparently, what they found. She gestured helplessly at the papers scattered across the counter. It was enough to make him change his will. The lawyer said he left everything to you, Opal. The house, his savings, his life insurance, everything. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. Everything? There's a letter, she said quietly. The lawyer has it. Something Blaine wrote to go along with the will. I don't know what it says, but... She looked up at me, and I saw real fear in her eyes. I think he found out everything I did, and I think he was planning to leave me. The silence stretched between us. Outside, a neighbor was mowing their lawn, the sound bizarrely normal in the middle of this revelation that was reshaping everything I thought I knew about my son's last months. He was going to contact you, Nola said finally. The investigator's report recommended it. Said there was clear evidence that your relationship with Blaine had been sabotaged by a third party. By you. By me. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. I never meant for it to go this far, Opal. I never meant to keep you from him completely. I wanted to be first in his life for once. And now he's gone. And you've lost everything. She turned to face me, tears streaming down her face. I've lost everything that matters. And the worst part is, I think he knew. I think he knew what I'd done. And he died thinking I was a monster. Maybe he had. Maybe in those final months, my son had finally seen through the web of lies his wife had built around us. Maybe he'd been planning to come home to me, to rebuild what we'd lost. But I'd never know for sure. That opportunity had died with him. I need to see that lawyer, I said, standing up. And I need to read whatever letter Blaine left. Nola nodded miserably. His name is David Hartwell. His office is on Main Street. He's expecting you tomorrow at 10. As I walked toward the door, she called after me. Opal, what are you going to do? About the house, I mean. About everything. I turned back to look at her. This woman who'd robbed me of years with my son, who'd twisted lies into truth until neither Blaine nor I knew what was real anymore. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but I'm going to find out exactly what my son wanted me to know. The door clicked shut behind me, and for the first time in 7 days, I had somewhere I needed to be. 2 places, actually. Riverside Cemetery to finally say goodbye, and a lawyer's office to discover what my son had left for me beyond money and property. I had a feeling Blaine's letter was going to change everything. The cemetery was quiet except for the sound of wind through the trees. Section C, Plot 247. A simple granite headstone with my son's name, his dates, and nothing else. No beloved husband, no devoted son, just his name and the stark reminder that 34 years wasn't nearly enough. I knelt beside the grave, my knees sinking into the soft earth, and placed the white lilies I'd brought, the same flowers that had been in my kitchen when Nola called to tell me he was gone. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I whispered. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder to stay in your life." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves overhead, and for a moment I could almost hear his voice. "Mom, you worry too much." That's what he used to say when he was little and I'd fuss over scraped knees and hurt feelings. I stayed there for an hour, telling him about everything I'd learned, everything I wished I'd done differently. When I finally stood to leave, I felt lighter somehow. Not healed, that would take time, but no longer carrying the crushing weight of not knowing where he was. David Hartwell's office was everything you'd expect from a small-town lawyer. Dark wood, leather chairs, walls lined with law books that looked like they'd actually been read. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Morrison, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." I settled into the chair across from his desk, my purse clutched in my lap like armor. "I have to admit," he said, pulling a thick file from his desk drawer, "in 30 years of practicing law, I've never seen anything quite like this situation. Nola told me Blaine changed his will recently, 3 months ago, to be precise, but it wasn't just the will he changed. He also hired a private investigator and left specific instructions for how his estate was to be handled. He opened the file and pulled out several documents. Before we go through the details, he left this for you." He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Blaine's familiar handwriting. My hands shook as I took it. "Would you like a few minutes to read it privately?" I nodded, unable to speak. He stepped out of the office, closing the door softly behind him. I stared at the envelope for a long moment before carefully tearing it open. The letter was 4 pages long, written in blue ink on plain paper. Blaine's handwriting had always been neat, careful, but this looked rushed in places, as if he'd been in a hurry to get the words out. "Mom," it began, and I had to stop reading for a moment to wipe my eyes. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone and David has followed my instructions to make sure you get this letter. I don't know how much time I have left. The doctors aren't optimistic about the next surgery, but I need you to know the truth about what happened between us. I hired a private investigator 6 weeks ago because something wasn't right. You disappeared from my life so gradually that I almost didn't notice at first, but then I realized we hadn't had a real conversation in over a year. Every time I tried to call you, Nola said you were busy. Every time I suggested visiting, she had a reason why it wasn't a good time. When I asked her directly about it, she told me you'd said you wanted space, that you felt I was too dependent on you and needed to focus on my marriage. That hurt, Mom, but I believed it because I trusted her. I thought maybe you really did want distance, but it never felt right. You raised me by yourself after Dad left. We were a team. You never made me feel like I was too much or too dependent. So I decided to find out what had really happened. The investigator's report is with my lawyer. You should read it, but I'll give you the summary. Nola has been intercepting our communications for years. Phone calls, emails, text messages. She's been canceling plans I never knew about and making excuses I never authorized. She's been lying to both of us, Mom, and keeping us apart deliberately. I confronted her about it last week. At first, she denied everything, but when I showed her the evidence, she broke down and admitted it. She said she felt like she was competing with you for my attention, that she needed to be the most important woman in my life. I told her that love doesn't work that way. You don't have to diminish one relationship to strengthen another. You taught me that, actually, back when I was worried about dating in high school. You said the heart has infinite capacity for love, and the people who matter most want to see you happy, not isolated. She cried and apologized and promised to fix things. But Mom, I don't think I can forgive this. She stole years from us, years we can't get back. While you were thinking I didn't want you in my life anymore, I was thinking you'd outgrown needing me in yours. The truth is, I never stopped needing you. I never stopped wanting to hear your voice telling me I could handle whatever was worrying me. I never stopped missing our Sunday morning phone calls where you'd update me on your garden and I'd tell you about work. I never stopped being proud to be your son. I'm leaving everything to you because you're my family, my real family. Not because of blood, but because of love. Because you're the one who was there when I had nightmares, who taught me to drive, who came to every baseball game even when you were working double shifts. I'm also leaving you something else. The power to decide what happens to Nola. She doesn't know about the will yet. She thinks everything will come to her automatically. If you want to provide for her, you can. If you want to make sure she's taken care of, that's your choice. But if you want her to face the consequences of what she's done, that's your choice too. I know this puts a burden on you that you shouldn't have to carry. But I trust your judgment more than anyone's, and I know whatever you decide will come from a place of wisdom, not revenge. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry I let her fool me for so long. I'm sorry I didn't trust my instincts sooner. I'm sorry I won't get to make it up to you in person. I love you. I've always loved you. Nothing Nola did changed that, even when I didn't understand what was happening. You're the best mother I could have asked for, and I'm proud to be your son. Please don't let guilt eat at you. You did nothing wrong. You loved me the way mothers are supposed to love their children. Completely, but not possessively. But Nola's jealousy and manipulation are not your fault, and they're not my fault either. Live your life, Mom. Be happy, and maybe sometimes when you're working in your garden or making that terrible coffee you love so much, think of me and smile instead of crying. All my love, Blaine P.S. I hid a key to our safety deposit box in the old coffee can in your kitchen, the one you used for loose change when I was growing up. There's something in there I want you to have. I read the letter 3 times before David knocked softly and came back into the office. My face was wet with tears, but they felt different from the tears I'd been crying for the past week. These weren't tears of grief and confusion. These were tears of relief, of love, of a connection that had never really been broken. Your son was very thorough, David said gently, settling back into his chair. The private investigator's report is quite detailed. Phone records, email logs, even witness statements from friends and neighbors who noticed the pattern of canceled visits and changed plans. He pulled out another document. The estate is substantial. The house, which is worth approximately $300,000, his savings account with $180,000, and a life insurance policy worth $500,000. Everything comes to you. Nearly $1 million. Money Nola had been counting on, had probably already made plans for. There's also this. He handed me a smaller envelope. Instructions for accessing the safety deposit box. Your son was very specific that you should visit it alone, when you're ready. I thought about the key he'd mentioned, hidden in the coffee can in my kitchen. After all these years, he'd remembered that silly old Maxwell House can where I used to save quarters for his school lunches. What are my legal obligations to Nola? I asked. Legally? None. She has no claim to the estate. Blaine left her nothing, and Texas isn't a community property state when it comes to inheritances. He paused. But I should mention, she's been calling the office every day since she found out about the will change. She's concerned about her financial situation. Concerned enough to admit what she did? She's admitted some things. Yes, she seems to understand that her actions have consequences. He leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Morrison, I've read your son's letter and the investigator's report. What was done to you and your relationship with Blaine was deliberate and cruel. You have every right to feel angry. I thought about Nola, sitting in her kitchen surrounded by papers, realizing that everything she'd built through manipulation and lies was crumbling around her. Part of me felt satisfaction at her panic. But another part, the part that sounded like Blaine's voice, wondered what he would want me to do. I need some time to think, I said finally, to process all of this. Of course. Take all the time you need. When you're ready to make decisions about the estate, call me. He handed me his card and copies of all the documents. And Mrs. Morrison, your son spoke about you often when he was preparing these arrangements. He wanted you to know that none of this was your fault and that he never stopped loving you. I walked out of that office feeling like I was carrying my son's voice with me for the first time in years. Not the distant, polite voice I'd heard in our last few conversations, but the voice of the boy who used to call me his best friend. There was one more stop I needed to make. The safety deposit box could wait, but the coffee can in my kitchen couldn't. I needed to hold whatever piece of my son was waiting for me there. The drive home felt different somehow, like I was finally going in the right direction. The old Maxwell House coffee can sat exactly where it had for the past 15 years, on the top shelf of my kitchen pantry, behind the flour and sugar. I'd forgotten it was even there, this relic from when Blaine was in high school and I'd save loose change for his baseball tournament fees and pizza money. My hands trembled as I lifted it down. It was heavier than I remembered, and when I shook it gently, I heard the soft jingle of coins mixed with something else, something that didn't sound metallic. I pried off the plastic lid and peered inside. Quarters, dimes, and nickels filled the bottom, just as they always had. But nestled among them was a small brass key and something wrapped in tissue paper. I pulled out the tissue paper first, unfolding it carefully. Inside was a small silver bracelet, one I recognized immediately. I'd given it to Blaine for his 16th birthday, engraved with "My son, my pride, my joy" on the inside. He'd worn it every day through high school, then college, but I hadn't seen it in years. I'd assumed he'd outgrown it or lost it. He'd kept it. All this time, even when Nola was poisoning him against me, he'd kept it. The key was small, clearly for a safety deposit box. There was a tiny tag attached with an address downtown and a box number, 247, the same number as his grave plot. He'd planned this carefully, even in his final months. I sat at my kitchen table, holding the bracelet and thinking about everything I'd learned today. Blaine had known. He'd figured out what Nola was doing and had taken steps to protect our relationship, even from beyond the grave. But there was still something I didn't understand. Why had she done it? What had driven her to systematically destroy the bond between a mother and son? My phone rang, jarring me from my thoughts. Nola's name appeared on the screen. "Hello? Opal, thank God you answered. Please, I need to see you again. There are things I didn't tell you yesterday. Important things." Her voice was different again, not the desperate panic from yesterday, but something closer to resignation. "What things?" "About why I did what I did. About things that happened before Blaine and I got married. You deserve to know the whole truth." I looked at the bracelet in my palm, at the key that would unlock whatever final message my son had left for me. Part of me wanted to hang up, to focus on Blaine's legacy instead of Nola's excuses, but another part needed to understand. For Blaine's sake, if not for my own. "I'll come over, but this is the last time, Nola. After today, I don't want to see you again unless it's through lawyers." "I understand." An hour later, I sat in her living room again, but this time the atmosphere was different. She'd cleaned up the scattered papers, made an effort to look presentable. She served coffee in actual cups instead of mugs, as if formality could somehow make up for years of deception. "I need to start from the beginning," she said, settling across from me. "From before Blaine and I even met." She stared into her coffee cup as if the words she needed were floating there. "I was engaged before, to a man named Marcus. We'd been together for 3 years, planning our wedding, building a life together." She looked up at me. "His mother hated me from day one." I waited, not sure where this was going. "She thought I wasn't good enough for him. Wrong social class, wrong family background, wrong everything. She did everything she could to break us up, exactly the kind of thing you probably think I am." "Nola, let me finish, please." She took a shaky breath. She succeeded. Marcus chose her over me. Canceled our wedding 3 weeks before the date because his mother convinced him I was only after his money, that I didn't really love him. I could see where this story was heading, and despite everything she'd done to me, I felt a flicker of sympathy. When I met Blaine, I swore I would never let another mother come between me and the man I loved. I know that doesn't justify what I did, but I need you to understand that it wasn't about you personally. It was about my own fear, so you decided to eliminate me as a threat. I decided to protect my marriage. She stood up, pacing to the window. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about protection and became about control. I liked being the only woman in Blaine's life. I liked that he turned to me for everything, even when you could see it was hurting him. That's the thing, Opal. I convinced myself it wasn't hurting him. Every canceled visit, every intercepted call, I told myself I was saving him from disappointment. You were getting older. You had your own life. Maybe you really didn't want to be bothered with us anymore. She turned back to face me, and her eyes were red again. I made myself believe my own lies, until these last few months when Blaine started asking questions I couldn't answer. When he hired that investigator, she sat back down, her shoulders slumping. The report didn't just document what I'd done, it documented how it affected both of you. What do you mean? Your phone records showed dozens of calls to our house that went unanswered. Emails you sent that I deleted before Blaine could see them. Birthday cards and Christmas gifts that I intercepted and threw away. Her voice broke. The investigator even talked to your neighbors. They said you stopped talking about Blaine because it made you too sad. I remembered those conversations with Mrs. Patterson next door, how I'd eventually stopped mentioning my son because every story ended with, "But he's too busy to see me now." There's more, Nola continued. The investigator found out about your medical records. I froze. What medical records? Last year, when you had that emergency appendectomy, you were in the hospital for 4 days. She looked directly at me. You listed Blaine as your emergency contact. The hospital called him. My blood went cold. I remembered that stay vividly. The sudden, terrifying pain, the rushed surgery, the long recovery. I'd been alone the entire time because I'd assumed Blaine didn't want to be bothered with his mother's health problems. I told him you were fine, Nola whispered. I told him you'd specifically asked not to be disturbed, that you had friends taking care of you and didn't want him to worry. He wanted to come? He was in his car, driving to the hospital, when I called him back and told him you'd been discharged and were resting comfortably at home with your friend Margaret. She was crying now. I convinced him that showing up would embarrass you, that you'd specifically said you didn't want him to see you looking sick and vulnerable. I thought about those 4 days in the hospital. How I'd stared at the ceiling wondering if anyone would even notice if I died. How I'd convinced myself that this was what independence looked like. Handling everything alone because your grown child had his own life to worry about. He wanted to come, I repeated, more to myself than to her. Every time, every single time something happened to you, he wanted to be there. The time you fell and sprained your ankle, when your car broke down on the highway, when you had that bout of pneumonia 2 winters ago, he wanted to help, but I convinced him you didn't want him to. The room felt like it was spinning. All those times I'd struggled alone, thinking my son didn't care. He'd been kept away by his wife's lies. Why are you telling me this now? Because yesterday, when I saw the panic in your eyes about not knowing where he was buried, I realized something. She wiped her face with a tissue. I didn't just steal him from you. I stole you from him too. And in the end, I lost him anyway. What do you mean? The night before he went into the hospital for his final surgery, he told me he was going to leave me. He said he couldn't stay married to someone who'd kept him from his mother for years. He said he was going to call you after the surgery and tell you everything. I closed my eyes, imagining that conversation that would never happen now. He died thinking I was a monster, Opal. And he was right. She looked at me with something approaching desperation. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but I need you to know. I loved him. I really did love him. I just loved him wrong. I stood up, suddenly needing to be anywhere but in this house full of lies and broken dreams. Where are you going? To the bank, to see what else my son wanted me to know. She followed me to the door. Opal, wait, the will, the inheritance. I know I don't deserve anything, but I need to ask. The house, Blaine's savings. I don't know how I'm going to... Stop. I turned to face her. I haven't decided anything yet, but I will tell you this. Whatever I decide, it won't be because you asked for my pity. It'll be because of what Blaine would have wanted. And what do you think he would have wanted? I thought about my son, about the man who'd hired a private investigator to uncover the truth, who'd changed his will to make sure I knew how much he loved me, but who'd also given me the power to decide his wife's fate. I think he would have wanted justice, but I also think he would have wanted mercy. I opened the door. I just don't know which one you deserve. The safety deposit box was in the basement of First National Bank, in a quiet room lined with small metal doors. The bank clerk led me to box 247 and left me alone with whatever my son had deemed important enough to hide away. Inside was a manila envelope and a small velvet jewelry box. I opened the envelope first. More letters, 3 of them, addressed to me in Blaine's handwriting, but with different dates spanning the last 2 years. He'd been writing to me, pouring out his heart in letters he'd never sent. The first one, dated 18 months ago, was full of confusion and hurt, and I don't understand what happened between us, Mom. I keep trying to figure out what I did wrong, but I can't remember any fight, any moment when things changed. The second, from 8 months ago, showed growing suspicion. Something's not right. Nola always has an excuse when I want to call you, always a reason why we can't visit. I'm starting to think she's lying to me about something. The third letter was dated just 6 weeks ago, right around the time he'd hired the investigator. I'm going to find out the truth, Mom. If she's been keeping us apart, I'm going to fix this. I miss you more than I can say. I opened the jewelry box with tears streaming down my face. Inside was my mother's ring, the one I'd given Blaine when he got engaged, telling him to save it for his first daughter. He'd saved it for me instead. There was a note tucked under the ring. This belongs with you, where it always belonged. Love, your son. I slipped the ring onto my finger and sat in that quiet bank vault, surrounded by my son's love letters and the proof that our bond had never really been broken. Nola had built walls between us, but she hadn't destroyed what we had. Now I had to decide what to do with the power Blaine had left me, the power to rebuild or to punish, to show mercy or to demand justice. For the first time since this nightmare began, I knew exactly what my son would have wanted me to do. I spent 3 days thinking about what Blaine would have wanted. 3 days reading and rereading his letters, wearing my mother's ring, and trying to separate my anger from my love for my son. On the 4th day, I called David Hartwell and scheduled a meeting with both him and Nola. She arrived at the lawyer's office looking like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair unwashed, and she clutched a tissue box like a lifeline. When she saw me, her eyes immediately filled with tears. Sit down, Nola. My voice was calm, controlled. I'd found my center in those letters from my son, in the certainty of his love for me. David cleared his throat and pulled out the estate documents. Mrs. Morrison has made her decision regarding the distribution of Blaine's assets. Nola's hands were shaking as she waited for me to speak. I've decided to give you the house, I said quietly. Her eyes widened in shock. What? The house is yours, free and clear, but that's all. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze directly. The savings account and life insurance money will go into a foundation in Blaine's name, supporting programs that help children maintain relationships with their grandparents after divorce or family conflict. She blinked rapidly, trying to process what I was saying. Why? She whispered. Because Blaine wouldn't have wanted you to be homeless, but he also wouldn't have wanted you to profit from the pain you caused. I pulled out one of his letters and read aloud. The heart has infinite capacity for love, and the people who matter most want to see you happy, not isolated. I taught him that when he was 17, worried about dating his first girlfriend. He never forgot it. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in my purse. Blaine understood that love isn't about control or possession. It's about wanting the best for someone, even when they hurt you. Nola was sobbing now, quiet tears that seemed to come from someplace deep and broken inside her. I don't deserve this kindness, she said. No, I agreed. You don't. But my son did, and this is what he would have wanted. David cleared his throat. There are conditions to this arrangement. Nola looked up, wiping her eyes. You'll sign a statement acknowledging what you did, I continued. Full disclosure of how you manipulated both Blaine and me. how you intercepted communications and fabricated excuses to keep us apart. It won't be made public unless you ever try to contact me again or spread lies about our family. I understand. You'll also attend counseling. Real counseling. Not just a few sessions to check a box. You need to understand why you did what you did so you never do it to anyone else. She nodded, still crying. And one more thing. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small photo album I'd put together over the past few days. These are pictures of Blaine growing up. His first steps. His high school graduation, his college years, all the moments you never saw because you were too busy trying to erase me from his life. I slid it across the table to her. I want you to look at these and understand what you destroyed. Not just my relationship with him, but his relationship with his own history. Every story about his childhood that he couldn't share with you because it involved me. Every family tradition that died because you cut us off from each other. She opened the album with trembling hands, staring at a picture of 5-year-old Blaine covered in birthday cake frosting, grinning at the camera. "This is the son you married," I said. "The man he became because he was raised with love, not manipulation. Because he was taught that family means supporting each other, not controlling each other." She turned the page and found a photo of teenage Blaine and me at his high school graduation, both of us beaming with pride. "He was so excited that day," I said softly. "He told everyone that his mom was his hero because I'd worked 2 jobs to put him through school. He said I was the strongest person he knew." "He said that about me too," Nola whispered. "After we got married, he said I was strong for building my own career, for knowing what I wanted. Then why wasn't that enough? Why did you need to be the only strong woman in his life?" She stared at the photo for a long time before answering. "Because I was terrified of losing him the way I lost Marcus. But I realize now that I lost him anyway. I just lost him more slowly, one lie at a time." David handed her the documents to sign. As she worked through the paperwork, acknowledging her deception and agreeing to the conditions of inheriting the house, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. This wasn't revenge. Revenge would have left her homeless and destitute. This wasn't forgiveness either. Forgiveness would have to come later, if at all. This was justice, tempered by the kind of compassion Blaine had always shown, even to people who didn't deserve it. When all the papers were signed, Nola looked up at me one last time. "Will you tell me about him?" she asked quietly. "About what he was like as a little boy?" "I know I don't have the right to ask, but I'd like to understand who he was before I met him." I thought about refusing. She'd stolen years of my son's stories from me. Why should I give her any back? But then I remembered something Blaine had written in one of his unsent letters. "I wish I could tell Nola about the time you taught me to drive in the church parking lot, or about how you used to sing Beatles songs while you cooked dinner. I wish she understood that loving you didn't mean loving her less." "He was curious about everything," I said finally. "Even as a toddler, he had to know how things worked. He took apart our toaster when he was 4 because he wanted to see where the toast went." A small smile crossed her face. "He still did that. Always tinkering with things, trying to fix them or make them better. He got that from his grandfather, my father. He was an engineer too." I closed my purse and stood up. "Blaine used to say he inherited the family gift for solving problems. I guess he was trying to solve the biggest problem of all at the end, how to bring his 2 families together." "His 2 families? You were his family too, Nola. In spite of everything you did, he loved you. That's why this was so hard for him, why he waited so long to confront you. He didn't want to choose between us." She stood up as well, clutching the photo album. "Thank you for this. For the house, for the pictures, for not destroying me the way I deserved. Don't thank me. Thank Blaine. This is his mercy, not mine." As I walked out of that office, I felt my son's presence with me in a way I hadn't since he was a child. Not the distant, polite man I'd talked to in our last few phone calls, but the boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street and tell me he loved me every night before bed. 6 months later, I received an unexpected package in the mail. Inside was a framed photo of Blaine that I'd never seen before, him at about 30, standing in what looked like a garden, laughing at something off camera. On the back was a note from Nola. "I found this in his desk drawer. He kept it next to his computer at work. I thought you should have it." Thank you for showing me what real love looks like. I'm learning. I placed the photo on my mantle next to the others and smiled. My son had been right about the infinite capacity of the heart. Even broken hearts, it seemed, could learn to love better. The foundation we'd established in Blaine's name had already helped dozens of families rebuild connections that had been damaged by manipulation or misunderstanding. Every quarterly report I received reminded me that his death, while tragic, had become something meaningful. But the real healing happened on quiet Sunday mornings when I worked in my garden, wearing my mother's ring and thinking about my son. Not about the years we lost, but about the love that had survived everything Nola had done to destroy it. He'd found a way to come home to me after all. Not in person, but in the letters he'd written, the money he'd left for helping other families, and the peace he'd given me in letting me choose mercy over revenge. Some bonds, I'd learned, are stronger than lies. Some love is bigger than loss. And sometimes, the greatest gift a child can give a parent is proof that they never stopped believing in the relationship that shaped them, even when that relationship seemed broken beyond repair. I still missed him every day. I always would. But I no longer carried the crushing weight of thinking he'd died not loving me. Thanks to his final gift, the truth about what had really happened between us, I could remember him the way he'd wanted to be remembered, as my son, my pride, my joy, and my greatest teacher about what real love could survive. That was enough. That was everything. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.